So maybe one of the most challenging things about playing solo instrumental fingerstyle guitar is figuring out how to make something sound like a complete song. You know, if you're singing the words, then you have all these verses to go through and that takes you through the song. But if you're just playing the melody on your guitar, even if you're playing that melody over a bass line, there's only so many times you can just play it over and over again before it just starts to sound too repetitive. The fix for that is to come up with something called a vamp. A vamp is just a 2 to 4 bar thing that you can play with a melody, with a groove that exists outside the melody of the song itself. And if you have a vamp, you can use it as an intro, you can use it as an outro, and you can use it in between the verses to provide some contrast. In this lesson, I want to show you a 3-step process for coming up with your own vamps so that when you know the melody of a tune, you can come up with this alternative piece of real estate that can go at the beginning, middle, and end of the song and create something that sounds like a complete arrangement just using the vamp and the melody. I'm going to demonstrate these ideas on the tune Nobody's Dirty Business, which is an alternating thumb tune in the key of C. If you'd like to get complete notation and tab for my arrangement of this tune, as well as in-depth lessons on how to put this entire song together, check out my membership, the Fingerstyle 5, at the link below or the link on screen. So the idea of the vamp is that it's a short, repeating chord progression, 2 to 4 bars. And how do we come up with this chord progression? And how do we come up with the vamp in general? We're going to follow 3 simple rules. The first rule is the vamp's going to be in the same key as the song we're playing. So if we're playing a song in C, the vamp's going to be in the key of C. Second rule is to use the same groove as the song we're playing. So if we're playing an alternating thumb song, we're going to use the alternating thumb for the vamp. And the third rule is, as far as what chords we can use to create the vamp, we're going to use the chords from the same key as the key the song is in. So if we're in the key of C, that means we've got the 1, 4, and 5 in C, which are C, F, and G. We've got the 2 or the 3 or the 6 chord in the key of C, which are D minor, E minor, and A minor. Now the vamp exists outside of the song proper. So unlike when you're arranging a song, where you're gonna probably stick to the melody of the song and the same number of bars, and improvising on the song, where you're going to make sure that what you're playing is basically structured around the chords of the song that already exist. When it comes to the vamp, you're kind of operating outside the boundaries of the song itself. And so you get to make up more of what you're doing with the vamp. Now you do need these 3 rules to sort of keep things on the rails, but beyond that, you can just start messing around within those rules to see what you come up with. Now for starters, the simplest thing to do is play the 1 chord. And there's nothing wrong with a vamp that's basically just like sitting on the 1 until you're ready to start. Right? And then if you were finishing up around through the melody, you could vamp on that 1 chord again. And the same thing when you get to the end of the tune. Now there's gonna be more to the vamp than that eventually, but just as a starting point, that's the first idea. You could just sit on the 1 chord. Now you could also rock between 2 chords. And so for starters, let's say you rocked between the 1 chord and the 4-chord. C is the 1 chord in the key of C, F is the 4-chord. The 4-chord more or less feels like it wants to come back to the 1 chord. At least that's one of the things that it wants to do. So you could be going between the C and the F chord. Until you're ready to start. And then again, once you've gone through the tune one time, again between C and F. Like that. Now I want to pause here and introduce one other idea about how the vamp works. And that is that on a lot of traditional tunes, sometimes the melody to the song itself ends sooner than the chord progression does. For instance, when you're playing the last 4 bars of Nobody's Dirty Business, you're on G for 2 bars, and then C for 2 bars, and then that's the end of one time through the melody and one time through the chord progression. But the melody ends right when you get to the C chord, and then you're really just sitting on C for 2 bars before it's time to play the melody again. So if the melody is done, you can theoretically just crop out those last 2 bars and start your vamp right after the G chord gets to the C. So for instance, if your vamp was to go from C to F, then as you're wrapping up the melody, here comes the vamp. And I'll back it up a little bit. I'll play the last 8 bars of the melody, but I'll only play really 6 bars, and then the last 2 bars will be where the vamp starts. So if I'm playing... that's where the vamp would come in. You don't have to do that, but it's one way that you can add a little more momentum to the song by just, as you get to the end of the melody, just jumping right in and starting your vamp. Let's look at just 2 more possibilities. We could have 1 and 4 and also 5. You could have 3 chords involved in the vamp. So you could sit on the C chord for maybe 2 bars and then have a bar of F. And again, just making things up with the material we have at our fingertips. So the 1 chord, the 4, and the 5 chord. We can use all of those because they're in the key of the song we're playing. And we want it to last for between 2 to 4 bars. So here's C for 2 bars. Here's F, the 4 chord. Here's G, the 5 chord. And it leads right into the melody. Crop out those last 2 bars of the chord progression. And then I'm back into the melody again. And finally, you don't have to start on the 1 chord. For example, you could start on the 4 chord and go back to 1. So you could have a 2-measure vamp that's just F and C. You could even make it sound a little bluesier by using 7th chords. one of the earlier ideas, and you could have F to C, maybe 3 times, and then maybe 2 bars of G. That's starting to expand the vamp out into a slightly bigger idea. But the other thing you can do when you're not starting on the 1 chord is you could also use one of the minor chords in the key, like A minor, which is the 6th chord. So we could have a measure of A minor, a measure of C, and then 2 bars of F. And that leaves you on the F set up to start on C, because again, the F chord kind of wants to go back to C when it's not wanting to go to G and then to C. So you could have A minor, C, F, and then here comes the tune. Sound good to come back to the C like the chord progression is supposed to, so that you can then start your vamp on A minor. And so that way you get the conclusion of the tune to C, and then you get this contrast where you start your vamp somewhere new on an A minor chord, which you haven't heard in the song so far. Now I realize that I'm doing a bunch of other stuff besides just play the chords. And so in the next lesson, I'll talk about how to come up with either the chords and rhythms that you play on top of that alternating thumb, or how to even expand it into a melody, or how to even have some bass lines. The things that really make the vamp start to feel musical and really bring it to life. If you'd like to get notation and tab for my complete arrangement of Nobody's Dirty Business, as well as for the vamp, check out my membership, the Fingerstyle 5, at the link below or the link on screen. And if you've got a question or a comment about today's lesson, leave it down below. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.